Welcome to the 13th episode of Teachers Glasses Presents Bollywood Talkies with Outlook. I'm your host, Mitrajit Bhattacharya. Tonight, my guest is an award winning actor who was called the Indian art house icon by Time magazine, a practicing sports person at the highest level, and a socially aware citizen whose NGOs work on gender equality and prevention of sexual abuse among children. Rahul Bose, welcome to Teachers Glasses Presents Bollywood Talkies with Outlook.
Thank you, Mitrajit.
Your latest on Netflix, Bulbul, has been loved by all for pushing the boundaries of contemporary filmmaking. Congratulations to the team. How did Bulbul come about?
Well, I can only speak for how Bulbul came about for me. When I read the script, I was struck by the story. I was struck by the fact that it was written with such a great deal of quiet rage and the underlying strain of extreme violence, whether it is the men towards the women or whether it's the woman, the churel towards the men later on. And all of it was cloaked in beauty, really, which you could even see in your mind's eye when you were reading the script. More personally, when I actually read the two roles, I realized that there was going to be a lot to do with the two characters that would not be said. So for me to always explore the unsaid, to always explore the spaces between the lines, literally the lines, is always much more exciting than something that is on the page all the way through. What was left then was to see if I could trust this director. I've worked with about 11 first-time directors in the past, and all you can ask for is to see if they have vision and passion. Skill and all of that is something that you really have to take a wager on. So I met Anvita, and it was clear to me that she was not a first-time director in the classic sense of the phrase. She had written films, she had written lyrics, she had been around for more than 10 years, she was cinema literate. So it really wasn't a first-time director if one has to look at it that way. So the punt, so to speak, was far safer with Anvita than with a first-time director who perhaps had never had any experience in any branch of cinema before. So these were the factors that played. And then, of course, who the co-actors were was very important. And I got to know who the co-actors were. I didn't know two of them, Tripti and Avinash, but I did know Pauli and Porom. And so I immediately began to have a comfort level. And then once I, of course, met with Karnesh Sharma, the producers, Anushka's brother, and the hands-on producer of the film, it was clear to me that this was going to be a project that was definitely not going to compromise on the making of the film. So, touch wood, my instincts turned out to be correct. They never have always been 10 on 10 correct. Sometimes, you just realize that you're going to have to compromise here or something there. But in this case, it was, and it turned out to be, as I've said on record, one of the, if not the most enjoyable cinematic experiences of my life, both on and off the set.
The characters of Indranil and Mahendro, the ones which you played, are hugely different, and yet they are cut from the same cloth. How did you approach the roles, and how difficult was it to play the characters?
You're right, Mitrajit. They were cut from the same cloth, the cloth of patriarchy, the cloth of entitlement, the cloth of aristocracy, the cloth of never having anything denied to you, the cloth of supreme control. Even if you are a 40-year-old trapped in an 8 or 9 or 10-year-old's mind, 40-year-old body, you still, like a spoilt aristocratic 9 or 10-year-old child, you're never denied anything. You point to something, you get it. You throw a tantrum, you're mollified. My approach to them was separate. I never once thought of them as twins. So the script, according to Indranil, is playing out very differently than the script according to Mahindra, because Mahindra in any case doesn't have any cerebral functions that are adult. So for him to process the fact that he's part of this story would have killed the character. So Mahindra was tougher, because invariably when you go into a role, and then when you go into a scene, and then when you go onto the set, you have done many, many layers of thinking and feeling to arrive at a certain point. And then, of course, once the camera rolls, what happens. But here, the more you would think as Mohindra before the shot, the more you would kill the performance. He has not a single thought in his mind. So I like to put one or two words in front of my eyes before I enter the set. And for Mohindra, it was always wonder. He would look at a butterfly and it would be wondrous. He would and forget about it in 2 minutes. And then he would see an ice cream and that would be wondrous. And he would see Bulbul's hair and that would be wondrous. And so for him, it was always wonder and extreme lack of thought. So the two toughest scenes of the film, one involves Mohindra and one involves Indranil, had no dialogue. The scene where Mahindra, from beseeching Bulbul to play with him, she's lying on the bed injured, and he's going, Khelo, Khelo, why don't you play with me? Utho, Utho. And then he starts playing with the bells, and she starts making these sounds, and he's quite amused, so he keeps playing with the bells, and she keeps making more sounds, and he finds it very funny, but she doesn't get up. So he clambers on top of her like a little boy would do next to his mother and say, come on, get up, let's play. And because he's been denied nothing in his life, he takes her like a 40-year-old man. He doesn't have to think about it. So to bridge the gap from the little child whose favorite person in the family is Bulbul, who he considers to be, he's always loved her. She's not moving. And even a little child knows when something very bad happens. When a little child drops a glass of milk, the first thing the child will do is look up at the adults, because she or he knows that they have made a mistake. So he realizes he's made a mistake and that something very bad has happened to her. And he runs down the corridor, gets into his bed, and I didn't do it. I did nothing. I wasn't even there. Children will do. This bridge, Mitrajit, is without any words. There's not a single word. And if you look at it in screen time, it's 1 minute. So to actually do this and to make it credible, from Khelo, Khelo, Utho, Utho, to this and then to that, in the script, it's Mahindra goes astride her, then runs down the corridor and hides, or jumps into his bed. That's it. It's 3 lines on a script. But the arc of the character, the entire appreciation from the audience's point of view of Mahindra, depends on these 2 minutes. If these 2 minutes don't hold, then you're dead in the water as an actor. Similarly with Indranil, of course, the prep was different. The prep was more cerebral, patriarch, aristocrat, kind, mature, sensitive. I don't believe he touched his wife sexually when she was 7 or 8 years old. I believe he waited for her to grow up to be, 15, 16, however incorrect it might sound today. But in those days, for him, it was, let her be of age, so to speak. And then the fatal flaw of jealousy that he has in his character. But again, from the time that he sees those stray bits of burnt paper flying out of the hearth, the fireplace, where there is Satya, there is Bulbul written, and some fragmented words of perhaps love letters. From that moment of anger, hurt, possessiveness, jealousy, he walks across to the bathroom, and in those 25, 30 steps, he changes into incoherent rage. into cruelty and violence. So again, there's nothing for the actor to say like, Bulbul, why did you do this to me? Why do you torture me, Bulbul? What have I not given you? He could work himself, and then proceed to beat her to pulp or beat her feet to pulp, as he does. But he has none of that. So again, as an actor, you have to bridge. You can't have the audience saying, "Arey, suddenly he's become this kind of a murderous person. We never saw this." So there had to be some kind of deep subterranean, held within control, which erupts slowly but surely. And so, again, in the script, it is Mahendra sees this, he gets very jealous, he's in a rage. He walks across to the bathroom with a poker in his hand and he beats her. But you have to bridge it, because if it doesn't if the audience says, come on, suddenly he began to beat this woman, but he seemed like a possessive, jealous, but in control person.
Very sure of what he has done throughout his life. So he was a very assured person. Like he knew what he was doing till that time.
And then even after he finishes beating her, the next day when he leaves, he knows he's done something really bad, but he's completely never going to admit to it. If anybody were to ask him, he would say, it's her fault. What have I not given? I've given her everything. What did she have to like? Why did she have to do this? But notice he doesn't break to pulp and beat to pulp his brother's feet, Satya. It's only the girl, it's only the woman, it's only his wife. So these were the great subterranean challenges in both characters. But as you know and I know, when you're playing a character that has a mental affliction, that has some kind of a special disability, then if you overact or overdo it even 1%, the audience will slaughter you, because that's where most people tend to tip, and then they fall off the cliff's edge, thinking they can take the performance that step further to wow everybody with how mad they can be, or special ability person they can be. Part of it is to do with the performance, and part of it has to do with the way Anvita has used my performance. In the hands of an insensitive, tone-deaf director, they can choose the wrong takes, just the wrong takes, and make your performance into a laughing stock. So a huge amount of credit should go not only for Mohindra, but for Indraneel and everybody in the film for the taste and the pitch that the director has chosen for each take, which I think was almost impeccable.
Another thing which stood out in the movie for me is the production design. And I think that was something which we have not really seen in a long time. So would you like to have a take on how the production design worked out for the film?
Well, first of all, production design has to be a film appropriate and has to lend a texture to a film that makes the cinematography look better, that makes the world more real, that makes it easier for the actors to respond in that particular moment. This is clearly a film that announces production design, because the design itself is so beautiful. But if you look at it, it is appropriate to the era and appropriate to the fable-like quality of the film. The costumes, the alta on her feet, the jewelry, the pan, the setting, everything has got this lush, luxurious, rich, idle-rich kind of sense to it. Oceans of space, many corridors, big rooms, lots of, obviously attention and care that is being lavished on this family. So Meenal, who has done the production design, she's an aesthete of enviable proportions. Siddharth Devan, who's the DOP, is an aesthete of enviable proportion. Anvita is an aesthete of enviable proportion. So when she says Raja Ravi Varma paintings as a cue for the lighting or for the look and the production design, or when she says Caravaggio for the way certain scenes have been lit, Siddharth, Meenal, and Anvita, like in any good-looking, appropriately shot film, uh, there will have to be this. This triangle determines everything, and Anvita can only see it in her mind's eye, but Siddharth has to do something with it, and Meenal has to obviously bring it to life. I think what Meenal has done in this film is there are strokes of genius that one will never know whether it was Meenal's idea or Anvita's unless one speaks to them. But for now, let's call it a partnership. Even the Jatayu and the Sita Haran at the back, and when I never look at myself on the video assist. I haven't done it for 20 years. I'm not interested in my performance. If the director wants me to do it some other way, I'm happy to do it. If the director can't communicate something to me and says, listen, just come to the video assist, you're not quite catching this light, or you're not quite, this is an odd angle. I'm seeing one half of your eye. You have to move a little bit, then I will. Otherwise, I don't. But when they asked me to come and look at the frame of how Indraneel is looking when he's beating Bulbul, I mean, it's mythic, Mitraji. It's really mythic. Now, that is an example of the DOP and the production designer making the acting even better. You don't have to do much in that. You're going to come out of that scene, people saying, wow, anyway, you know? So it's not that, but it all came together because they didn't know how I was going to beat her, what my pose was going to be, what I didn't know myself. It's only when you have to experience the emotion of the extreme rage you feel, that then the hand doesn't stop. It rises and rises and rises till he is fully arched, and he's bringing the entire weight of his anger, of patriarchy, of male entitlement. How dare you? That is why when you have upper caste atrocities on Dalits, you wonder what the extent of that cruelty is. I mean, I can name you cases of where the bodies have been, there are now dead bodies and they are being defiled. And I'm not talking about sexual killing, I'm talking about caste killings. You're wondering what is the extent of that cruelty. It is that I am going to teach you and people like you a lesson for centuries, by the way I brutalize, you know?
Absolutely.
So that idea, then when they saw me do it, then when there was always that picture in the background, then the lightning, I mean, it is really, for Anvita, it's a stroke of cinematic genius, that kind of moment. And you only hope that that kind of moment doesn't overwhelm the story, doesn't overwhelm the film. It should not just be Sundar bahut tha picture, lekin yaar usme tha hi kuch nahi kind of thing. So she was very careful to make sure that performances and the weight of the film was held by the actors. And I was always aware of that. I was always aware of the fact that the beauty cannot overwhelm the tale, the performances, the art, the drama, the human emotions, the pathos, all of that. Whatever it was in my control, of course I did. But, I think in general, I think Anvita pulled it off.
You are a quintessential Sobo person. Cathedral School, Sydenham College, rugby, boxing, advertising, copywriting, job. How did Dave Benegal's English August happen?
I was asked to audition for that role based on a play that I was doing with another fellow South Bombay actor, Rajat Kapoor, with a South Bombay director, Rahul Bose, in an English play that's very South Bombay, called Are There Tigers in the Congo, in South Bombay at the Max Muller Bhavan, where Uma Dakunia, Rahul Dacunia's aunt, who also lives in South Bombay, was watching, and she was the casting director for Dave Benegal's English August. And so she saw me there and asked if I would be interested in auditioning for this role. And now who wouldn't? Once I read the book, I was like, my God, I would love to. The audition process took a long time. Dave had earlier cast a gentleman called Parvez Merchant, who was a very good actor, who was, I think, Dance of the Railroad. He had done a play, and Dance and the Railroad, maybe? Anyway, and for some reason, Parvez didn't work out. And so Dave was looking for somebody to cast again. And I suppose he was even more careful this time. So I think it might have taken me 6 months to get that role. And he really put me through the ringer. He really made me audition time and time again, and never quite gave me the green signal. And it was only after many, many, many months that he said that he was satisfied that I could play Agastya. So that's how I got cast for English August. And would you like me to tell you a little bit about the experience, or is that
Yes,
the answer to your
absolutely.
question?
Absolutely. I would love to know more about your take on English August and uh, the entire process.
So,
Yeah.
so then what I did once I was cast, I met Upamanyu and Upamanyu Chatterjee, the writer of the novel, and he had co-written the story or the screenplay, if I'm not mistaken, with Dave. And so Upamanyu and I chatted, and I realized that it was very autobiographical.
Sorry,
That
I have
Upamanyu,
a question at this stage that what do you think was the clincher in your favor? Like how, how and why did they cast you? Do you have any idea?
no, I don't, but I can guess.
Yeah.
There was one audition that I did, which was lying down in his living room in Juhu, and it was one of the internal monologues of Agastya. He was very intent that I never look like I'm acting. He was very intent that I throw all the lines away, mumble them incoherently if need be, but absolutely never ever just be slack and real. And I was lying down, literally lying down. He was filming me on top, and I was just what was supposed to be voiceovers. I was saying them. I don't know what I'm doing here, and that the collector. Oh my God, what a guy! You know, that kind of stuff. Just like murmuring to myself about the different people I've met, and like, how long I will last here. Just, I don't drink. I don't like, I'm never gonna. No, whatever. And I think it was that after that audition that at least I felt that he began to reveal a spark in his eyes about the fact that, yeah, I think this guy can pull it off. But to be dead honest with you, I don't think Dave was entirely sure, even while shooting the film.
Okay.
Unless that's Dave's way, in which case I don't know. Unless that's just his way of being. But he never gave me the security of like some other directors will come and put their arms around you and hold you
Yeah.
and hug you and say, "My God, you're incredible." Dave was quite the opposite. So I think in that respect, if you looked for affirmation uh, from Dave, he's a reticent person anyway. He's a quiet person. He's reserved. So, you just have to work with different people. And that was fine. But getting down to, so I really actually believe that he might not have been 100% sure that I was going to be able to pull it off till God knows, maybe till he was editing the film. I don't know. When we began to shoot, so I met with Upmani Chatterjee. So what I always do is I create the biography of the character from the age of 0 to the point of time that the film begins. And then I let the script take over. I didn't need to do much. This was a book. It had been written with density and with grace and with humor. So I could easily see his entire biography. But sometimes you didn't know whether, sexual orientation you did know, but how many times had he had sex? Music you did know, but did he also have other kinds of music? Ex-girlfriend you had some idea of, so just a very little bit needed to be filled in by Upamanyu. So he was very amused when I was talking to him about the questions I was asking. Then I went to Stephen's and I checked out the college. Then I went to typical Stephanian parties in Delhi at the time, 1992 and 93. And, hung out with people who spoke this kind of lingo and generally sort of imbibed the whole Delhi vibe that Agastya has going for him. The Kolkata vibe, since I'd been going to Calcutta since I was a child, I was quite familiar with that kind of vibe, but not the Delhi vibe. So all of that filled in the little blanks that were left. And then when I began to shoot, it was in Narsipatnam and Vishakhapatnam and Bhimlipatnam. We started, if memory serves me correctly, the land records office scene, which was in Narsipatnam. And that was a very difficult shoot, that stint, because at the time, I don't know how much it is developed right now. At that time in undivided Andhra Pradesh, it was nothing more than a small town. So, there were food problems, there were hygiene problems, there were hotel stay problems, all of that, like you would imagine. But Anup Jotwani, who did the camera work, and Anuradha Parikh, who did the production design, Dev, who had a very clear idea of what he wanted, the fellow actors, Salim Shah, Tanvi Azmi, and they were all so good. Even the character actors were wonderful. So the feeling was very, very secure artistically, that you were doing something that was going to be really good. But it's your first film. You have no clue how you are, how you look, at the time there wasn't even a video assist, if I remember correctly. And it was Sync Sound, Vikram Joglekar, the father of all the various sound designers who've come after that. His gharana, so to speak, started then. He was doing the sound. It was a really, really skilled bunch of technicians and artists who were working on that film. Hands down, in my opinion, one of the finest films India has made, and certainly one of the one or two fine English films that this country has come out with.
So your experimentation with English and art house movies continued through the 90s. Till you had your first brush with commercial Hindi movie that happened with Govind Nihalani's Takshak in 1999, where you played the villain against Ajay Devgan. Was the commercial setup any different, and did you enjoy the process?
So first of all, my partnership with cinema in English ended when cinema in English ended. I think you could pretty much, everybody said I'm fine must have been one of the last films that I directed that was made in 2000. That after that, it was what should have been English cinema being made in Hindi. So
Nicely put.
A Jhankar Beats could have been an English film, right? With the same milieu and the same all of that stuff, because it was just financially unviable to have an English film being made with a limited audience. If you could cheat and make it in Hindi, English, kind of urbanize it, stuff like that. So I can imagine a few other buddy films and stuff of that time that should socioculturally truly have been made with much more English language than Hindi. But that's fine. Takshak was in 1999, well before the demise of English cinema. I can't call it a commercial film, Mitraji.
Yeah.
I can only say that it was a Govind Nihalani film, which is invariably in Takshak. Yes, there are songs and Tabu does sing, but she's a dancer. So it was real, as in a pretty large parts of the film were quite real. I didn't feel uncomfortable in terms of like, where is this being pitched? Ajay is an actor who I remember made his reputation as an actor who never pushed, who always played very subdued and very internalized, interiorized kind of roles or interpretation of roles. So that was also wonderful. And Tabu, I mean, she's one of the finest we have. So really, there was no question of me having to arc differently. If anybody was slightly over the top, it was me. My character was larger than life. My character was snorting cocaine and drinking, and his insecurities were externalized in this false bravado and swagger, like an Al Pacino in Scarface kind of thing. So in that respect, I felt very, very comfortable. My approach has always been the same. I created a biography of the character. He's a Rajput. He comes from Rajasthan. Where did he study? In a privileged, one of these boarding schools that have all these princes floating around the place and people with titles and khansamas and, fancy cars, dropping them off at boarding school and things like that. And then, of course, going to America for a university degree. Yes, and that's how we discussed it with Mr. Nihalani. And then coming back, then taking over the family business, so to speak, all of that stuff. So my approach was the same. My prep was the same. And working with Mr. Amrish Puri, working with Ajay, working with Tabu. Again, what a wonderful cast. What a great cast of actors. Now the music and all of that stuff comes later. That stuff, it so happens that people remember the music in my films. But I didn't choose Jhankar Beats for its hit music, or Pyar Ke Side Effects for Pape Pyar Karke, or Takshak for Tabu's wonderful dance sequence. That stuff never decides my choice of films. It does for many people who have their eye on the commercial, on the commercial angle, and why not? So Takshak for me was very satisfying. Netra was new. I remember Raghuraman, and she was playing my girlfriend. And I think the first scene we ever did was a kissing scene. And I was like, "Hi Netra, I'm Rahul, and I know that." I mean, I've never understood why can't actors who work so hard at different scenes, when a kiss has to be angry or sadistic or cruel or passionate or hopeless or hopeful. There are so many different kinds of kisses. How do you not workshop something so important as that? And I'm not pointing a finger at Takshak or Mr. Neelani or Netra. I'm making a larger comment.
Yeah.
This is something we really need to think about, because you just simply, it's such a big part of your performance. A love-making scene. Okay, I understand that violent scenes, you obviously can't workshop them in that respect, but scenes that require so much of characterization and arcing of the character, and it depends on these things. You're going to have to find ways to, at least without physically playing it out, at least getting there in terms of talking, discussing, all of that. So Netra was also wonderful to work with. And, there was Atul Kumar, who now is a renowned theatre director and owner of a repertory and all of that. So it was a great bunch of people. And I think a perfect start with Mr. Nehlani, under his shrewd eye as a cinematographer, as well as his choices that he makes as a director. It was a really lovely start to my Hindi movie career. But there were long dialogues in Hindi, and now when I look at Takshak, I'm thinking, ठीक है, मतलब थोड़ा और तो मेहनत किया होता तो शायद, it would have been slightly better. But an actor thinks about.
But that's always the case with actors. I mean, you look back something which you have done
with
21 years
with
ago.
Actors, with cricketers, with everybody. Anybody who's seeking to move forward in life always looks back and says, I could have done that better.
Career spanning close to 3 decades now, yet it's very difficult to box you as an actor. On one hand, you have done art house movies like Mr. and Mrs. Iyer, The Japanese Wife, 15 Park Avenue, with a director like Aparna Sen. And on the other hand, you have enjoyed your stint in commercial movies like Jhankar Beats, Pyar Ke Side Effects, Chameli, Chain Kuli Ki Main Kuli, Shaurya, Dil Dhadakne Do, etc. What's the trick to balance between the two and come out a winner each time?
Gosh, I don't know what the trick is. I think to choose something that interests you, and you think that if you like the story, if you like the spirit of the story, that people will like it too. So I think that I've never looked at whether this is going to be an art house movie or a commercial film. I've always looked at it as a film, but I have recognized very clearly the pitch of the film. Pyar Ke Side Effects is played at a certain pitch, which is slightly high.
Right.
If you play Sid in Pyar Ke Side Effects at the pitch that you're playing Indraneel and Bulbul, you'll be lost.
Right.
So you have to latch on to the pitch of a piece. And then, I mean, if the violin and the drums and the guitar are loud, then the vocalist has to be of a certain volume also.
Right.
That's what I mean. As far as the oscillation between art house and commercial cinema is concerned, I've always looked at it as an oscillation between genres. Right. Some days you want to do a comedy. And
Right.
after doing 4 comedies, even if uh, the greatest king of comedy, Charlie Chaplin, walked up to you, you'd say, you know what, I can't do a fifth one. I want to do something more with more
Right.
gravitas. And so
Right.
it's also a question of appetite, about changing the taste in your mouth every now and then. Um, Mitrajit, I believe a career is made not from what you say yes to, but what you say no to. It's a bit like that story about how Michelangelo's David came about, where apparently it's apocryphal, but he said he's believed to have said that I took out the parts that were not David.
Okay.
So I'm not for a moment suggesting my career is David. I'm just saying that I think it's very, very important to say no to many things. And therefore, I have, barring one film in my career which sticks out like a sore thumb, and I don't want to talk about it because
Okay.
I don't want to hurt the producer's feelings more than I have in
Fair
the
enough.
past. Um, Barring one mistake, which the fellow actors were the best actors in the country, and it went wrong. Uh, Barring that, every single I have very few regrets. And unlike a banker or a gardener or a fisher person, the mistakes you make in cinema live forever.
That's right.
They just don't go away. In my case, the artistic quotient check has to be even more stringent nowadays, and as an actor always has been. So I've always dreaded regret. I'm not very good at handling regret. I find it it weakens me more than regret, and jealousy and anger. These are three things that really make me feel physically and spiritually weak. It saps my soul. So I rather than deal with that, I'd much rather be more careful. So that's been one of the great motivators for me to say yes or no. There have been times when I have not said no when two films have clashed. I remember Reema Kakti offered me Honeymoon Travels in the role that KK finally played with great elan, and I had to say no because it was clashing with Jhankar Beats. And so, there are those kinds of regrets you can handle, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the ones that you've done, and the ones that you shouldn't have done, and the ones that maybe, that kind of regret, thankfully that load is very light on my shoulders.
You have acted in 6 different movie industries, including Bengali, where you have been a part of many acclaimed movies like Onuranun, Antohin, Kalpurush, Shonde Namar Age, Shesher Kobita. Talk about your experience of working in Bengali films and what you have enjoyed the most acting in those films.
My experience of acting in Bengali films has been, barring a little wrinkle here and there, superb. I love working in Bengal. I love working with uh, Bengali directors, Bengali writers, Bengali art directors. I mean, there is such a force of passion and love. I need people. This subcontinent is, and I don't just say India, this subcontinent is full of people who are out out there. Their hearts are pumping, their heads are also, everything is pumping outwards. I need that. A lot of people think that I'm a Western type, I'm a sophisticate, I'm a South Bombay kind of guy. Very far from it. Very, very, very far from it. Inside me, there beats a heart that is warm, sweaty, noisy, cacophonic, loving, emotional, mercurial, all of that. And I've never hidden it. I don't know why it seems that I'm this uptight sort of South Bombay guy, but I've never hidden it. I've always celebrated it, and that's why I've never left this country. I've never left this country to study. I've never left this country to work. I've never wanted to leave this country. This country, this region, this part of the world, uh, my my feet, my soul, my blood is deeply anchored in this soil. And in this part of the world, most so in Bengal, most so in my Maharashtrian side, most so in my Punjabi side. So I grew up in Kolkata, Kolhapur, and Kasauli. Getting back to your question, so working in Calcutta was, everything was soaked in what my father or my Pishima or my Dadi or Dida and all of, it was soaked in that world. So I rediscovered Calcutta as a human being through my acting with Onu Ronon in 2001 or 2 or 3, I forget. All the way up to the last one I did was, I think, Shesher Kobita, but Bulbul was also shot in outside Kolkata and in Kolkata. So all the way through, I rediscovered Bengal, Calcutta. My Bangla has become so much better because of my films, because of the people I've hung out with, because of the friends I've made, and my appreciation for Kolkata specifically, after having been born there and spent the first 3.5 years of my life there, and gone back there every Durga Puja. And sometimes, I don't want to come back here. Let's go somewhere else. You know how it is. Even with Kasauli and Kolhapur, I don't want to be here. Let's go somewhere else. But when I rediscovered Kolkata, today, in many interviews, people have asked me, which is my favorite city in the world? And I say New York, but a close second is Kolkata. I mean, that's, whether it's Tony, whether it's Shumon, there's no question. I will keep returning to Kolkata and I will keep doing Bengali films. And I started doing them when nobody was doing them from Bombay, barring 1 or 2 films that have been made. And when Onu Ronon ran for 104 days, 14 weeks, when Ontuhin ran for 91 days, 13 weeks, it changed the face of that middle of the road Bengali cinema had vanished. There was art house, there was, Buddhadev Babu and Gautam and all these wonderful people. And on the other hand, there was all the commercial cinema happening and nothing in between. People began to go back to cinema halls. The multiplexes began to be built. And, Tony was the right guy at the right time at the time. Of course, now look at it. There are over 30, 40 directors who are making wonderful, interesting, funny, bitter, sharp kind of cinema that weren't there. So, it's been glorious.
So I want to add just a small part, if you can just add on Aparna Sen and Tony Roy Chaudhary, who you have worked for over a couple of films, more than a couple of films.
Aparna is the classic humanist. If you see 36 Chaurangi Lane, it's just, even today, it's a classic. Her influences, whether it's Satyajit Ray or many other influences she's had artistically in her life, through her father, through her mother, through the world she grew up in, her work as an actor all those decades. So she's the kind of person that I would have as one of my 5 favorite people to call for dinner. She remains a very dear friend. Her political concerns, her loves and likes, her sense of humor, the table that she has, which is prima donna, because that's how she seems. We were walking down, I think, Shialda station, Munene, during Mr. and Mrs. Iyer, and we were shooting on the platform for that final, very, very crucial scene, and there were people falling at her feet. Aparnadi, Kamunachi, Rinadi, this, that. I was like, my God, you really are a prima donna. So I call her PD and she calls me Brando, not for the excellence of my acting, but because she complains that I mumble all the time. And that in the edit, she's always trying to say, what did he say? What is he saying for the dub? So she calls me Brando because of that. And so we're very close. We have a very deep, warm love and regard for each other. And she is, we've had flaming arguments and rows, but they are between 2 people who love each other. It's as simple as that. And so that's Aparna. Tony is different. So Tony, I have seen from the time when he wasn't a filmmaker, right? His first film was Onu Ronon. Without a shadow of doubt, Aniruddha Roy Chaudhary is one of the nicest, noblest, kindest human beings that has ever walked this planet. And even if he had made terrible movies, I would work with him time and time again because of the gold in his soul. It is so beautiful to see that man's soul. Tony is far more reticent, far less communicative as a director of actors. He needs good actors, not because he's a bad director. He needs good actors to understand what he is saying without him saying much. He's a deeply sensitive man. His musical tastes are second to none. So when he wrote Onto Him, he had written Onu Ronon in that classic Bengali hero style, Renaissance man, poetry, women, he is respectful towards, everything is outward and cheerful and energetic and to a bright new dawn kind of thing.
Right.
And he had written Onto Him's character like that. And I said, Tony, please, can we get out of this? Can you write the first boring leading man in Bengali cinema that I would have seen? I can't say I've seen all Bengali, but just boring. Somebody who works hard and goes home. No art, no poetry, no culture, no theater, nothing. He just works. He's almost from another part of the country. It would seem, you know, no refined sensibilities.
Right.
Let's write him like that. And then let's see how this, because then for a man like that to get into an internet romance, so unlikely. Does he have the time for this nonsense? He's a no-nonsense cop. Amar rokto khaki, he says at some point, you know. So I think, I said, then to Tony's credit, he found that very interesting. He said, yes, let's go all the way out to the other extreme. And we did. But because I am playing him, there will come a certain sensibility, a certain intelligence, a certain emotional experience that the character will have. So why do you have to write him with that? Why can't you write him, you know? So Tony is the kind of person who I would dare to talk to like this and say, change the character completely since you haven't yet started making the film. Because we have a friendship that is extremely close, and he can tell me anything and I can tell him anything, and that has helped. We had a long conversation yesterday.
You have also featured in prominent movies down south, particularly in Tamil with Vishwarupam 1 and 2, with Nirutara in Kannada. How are the southern movie industries different from the Hindi in terms of work ethics and style?
Very difficult to generalize, Mr. Jeet. First of all, southern means nothing. Tamil is different from Telugu, is different from Malayalam, is different from, you know, any other language. So I would not go southern. I would not even go Tamil. I would say certain filmmakers you can link in the way they approach their cinema. Janu Barua, or Adur Gopal Krishnan, or Aparna Sen, you know, or, you know, you understand the genre of filmmakers I'm talking about. You know, when you enter, not that I've worked with Janu or with Adur, but when you enter that set, you know you're in this kind of an environment. And then you can link the commercial filmmakers similarly. The big commercial filmmakers of action films in Tamil cinema can have a closer affinity to the way they work with the big action filmmakers in Hindi cinema. So I think there is more of an affinity like that, if you look at it that way. So, you know, whether it's Niruttara, which I did with Apurva Kasaravalli, who's Girish Kasaravalli's son, there was a certain approach into that is very familiar as the Aparna Sen brand of cinema. You know, Santosh Sivan, when he makes his films, I think stands alone. It's a different chemistry. Santosh's work is part international, part steeped. His work ethic is the fastest shooter of films I've seen in my life. When he's directing and driving the camera himself, it's unbelievable how much work we get done a day. I never went back to my vanity van once during Before the Rains, which was shot in Kerala, and never once. They said,
Oh,
sir, Vanity Van, you want to go? I said, yeah, let's go. As I'm walking, and it says the shot is ready.
yeah.
So I just gave up. For those
Yeah.
40 days, I never entered my van. I used to only enter my van to change, and then at the end of the shoot to change again. Because first of all, it's great fun being on a Santosh Sivan set. Second of all, the weather was lovely in Munnar in January. And third, he's so quick. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're working with Mr. Kamal Hassan, now he's a legend. The scale of Vishwarupam. I mean, all of that, it was like working on an international production, green screen work, wire work, explosives. The production designer was from Vietnam. The makeup guy was from America who had done prosthetics. The guy who was doing explosives was some other exotic part of the world. So you were on an international set. It was just that Mr. Kamal Hassan was there, and there were actors who were from all over the country. But otherwise, it was very much part like I can't imagine comparing that kind of an experience to anything else I've done in my life.
So your first and second directorial were separated by more than 1.5 decade. Talk about the process of choosing offbeat subjects. Like everybody says, I'm fine. And then after many years, Purna, Courage Has No Limit. What do you enjoy about directing the most? And why have we not seen you more often as a director?
I decided to direct Everybody Says I'm Fine when I wrote the story, and I loved it so much I didn't want to give it to anybody else.
Okay.
I, at that time, was 5 films old as an actor.
Right.
So,
2001, right?
so I can't even say that I had learned direction through years and years of being an actor.
Right.
But it came very naturally to me. I had directed on stage before. It came very naturally to me. If you see the film now, it's very unique in its story.
That's right.
I can't see something like that. It's just magic realism meets a chamber piece. Even people in the West were like, how did you think of a story like this?
Yeah.
And so both the awards I got for it were from the West. It was, at its heart though, it's actually a deeply emotional, in my opinion, universal film. Everybody says I'm fine, but nobody is. And the best way you can be fine is to admit you're not. And that's the heart of the film.
Yeah.
If you look at the filmmaker who made that, and there cannot be a riskier film to make, and you spent 2.5 crores on it at that time. And it was the only English film in history in India to get distribution through Panorama Entertainment, an American company in 17 cities in America. The reviews, LA Times review, the reviews we got in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I mean, the reviews were also extraordinary. Some of the reviews were bad, but some of them were very extraordinary. And then after that, I was at the top of my acting career. So it had nothing to do with not wanting to direct. It was to do with I was getting great movies after that. I mean, Chameli, Shaurya, Pyar Ke Side Effects, Chankar Beats, Onuronon, Ontohin. Every single film happened after that. I'd only done Takshak, Bombay Boys, and English August before that. I think that was it. I'm not even sure I'd done 5 films. So my whole career was ahead of me. It's only when things began to slow down discernibly by 2012, 2013, that I began to think about making a new film. And as I began to think about that, and as I began to, I mean, if you look at Purna is a very, very different movie. It is very, very commercial. You know the beginning and the end. It's a James Bond film. Little girl climbs Everest, becomes youngest to climb Everest, holds tricolor on top of mountain, and clap, 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 clap. That's it. But I don't know whether you've seen Purna.
Yeah.
Amitav Ghosh saw the film, Aparna saw the film, some Mukul Keshavan saw the film. None of them were prepared to see a film that had so much of her backstory, of where she came from, of the sociological comment about patriarchy, about being a girl, about orthodoxy. Um, all of that was done in a very, actually in a very seamless way. It wasn't polemical. It wasn't heavy.
You shot in the village she comes from, right? If that is that correct?
Of course, in
Yeah.
Pakala.
Yeah.
But when she summits, it's only then you realize the journey that this undereducated, underfed, tribal, Adivasi girl has traversed. You then go through that journey, and it's, so my take on this, on a tale like this, is very different from the take of a big action filmmaker, you know.
Right.
And although there are 170 shots of Everest climbing going on there, you still know that this is not just about that.
Yeah.
So for me, it was all those layers: her childhood, her elder sister, and her thwarted ambitions, and her death in the corridor of a hospital, which we still read about now. You know,
Yeah.
all of that, her her premature pregnancy, her being married
Right.
as a child bride, all
Right.
of those things. All of those things must layer the base camp and camp 1, camp 2, camp 3. The summit is just the second half of the film. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So for me, as somebody, a very close friend of mine said, to see how your soul and your consciousness has grown, you have to see everybody see them fine, or your priorities. You have to see
Yeah.
everybody see them fine, and then you have to see Purna, to see this
Right.
person and how this person has evolved.
So you donned the hat of a producer with Purna and had introduced some very strong charters for shooting in your set. We'll be very keen to know some of those steps you have taken because that may help the industry going forward in future.
Oh, I've given all the charters to my friends
Yeah.
who are producers, and I've asked them to use it.
Yeah.
There was a green charter which
Right.
said that we will not use any material that is not recyclable. Uh, the
Right.
only the only thing that we had to agree on was uh, the use of plastic bottles, because at
Right.
that time, these fancy steel bottles and stuff hadn't come out. But otherwise, the plates, the glasses, the cutlery, the crockery, everything was either mud or glass or paper. Everything that could be recycled or washed and reused. We had dustbins the size of me that were carried up 15,000 feet in January near the border of Indochina and Sikkim, where we were shooting, to Pakala, 45 degrees centigrade. We left every place where we shot cleaner than it was before we went there. And for me, very important is the comfort of the women on the set. And
Okay.
I can't bear to see women desperately looking for a bathroom in trying conditions, or not going to the bathroom for 14 hours. So we had portaloos, porter cabins, cleaned every 10, 15 minutes wherever we went. Unless the women said to me, there are good conditions here, we don't need you to get porter cabins or portaloos.
Right.
So it was my sworn mission to make sure that every woman was looked after in terms of this very basic thing wherever we shot. That's one. Two, we had a sexual harassment charter
Okay.
where we had a committee that had nothing to do with anybody making the film. Nandita Shah and Nandita Gandhi of Akshara were on that committee. Any complaints, posh complaints, would go to them. So every single woman was told, every single man was told that we have a sexual harassment charter. It was read out to my entire crew so that they knew what was acceptable, what was unacceptable, and the women knew where they could go, or even the men. So that was the second charter. And the third charter was a child labor charter, which was, we have
Fantastic.
lots of child artists on our film.
Right.
So I created a protocol that no child will work for more than 8 hours a day, but no child will work for more than 4 hours at a time. And every 4 hours, the child will take a 1 hour break. And every child will have their dietary preference told to us. And whatever is available in that region, it will be cleared by the child or the child's guardians or adults accompanying them to okay the food. Every child will have a teacher or a coach or a tuition teacher, either appointed by them and paid by us, or appointed by us for the child to do homework and never miss school. So all of this was communicated to the parents, to the elders of all the children, because we had, at one time, we had 40, 50, 60 children, who were climbing mountains. And I would personally, go meet them, have lunch with them. But these charters, I thought, were very, very important for people to understand that thus far and no further. This has to be laid down. So I very happily made those charters available, and whether people use them or not is not in my hands. But it is something that I will only build on in the future. It's not something that will lessen. It will only increase.
If you have to choose the toughest role and the most satisfying role in your career, which ones would they be?
Toughest role would be Snehamoy in The Japanese Wife.
Okay.
Because he's nothing like me.
Yeah.
He's a schoolmaster in the Sundarbans. He's a village boy. And then even in his soul, maybe we both have the same kind of soul, but we don't.
Right.
He's unambitious, very, very gentle. I mean, I'm a very kind person, but I'm not gentle as he is. He's indecisive. He lets things run. He's a bit of a dreamer. He's not very precise, disorganized, doesn't know where his glasses are sometimes, a bit of a fumbler. There's something little Chaplin-esque about him. So to get to Snehamoy was a long journey. And I didn't get to Snehamoy till maybe 2 days before the shoot. It was very, very, very harrowing. I spent time in the Sundarbans, it was just a lot of cycling with an umbrella and a dhuti, but it has to seem like he's breathing. You know how some of these people do the most challenging physical things with the least amount of effort because they've done it all their lives. They're like water.
Yeah.
Snehamoy is definitely the toughest role I've done in my career.
And the most satisfying one?
Snehamoy, Indranil, Mohendro, and in a strange way, I Am.
Okay, interesting. Onirs.
Yeah, I had to play a homosexual who is caught in a compromising position with another boy at Bandra Bandstand. So it was a very dark space it took me into. So in a way, I found that to be to carry that off was very rewarding. I'm not saying it's the best role of my career. I'm saying it's possibly the most, you're talking about when I felt I've done something here.
Right.
But there have been moments in all the other films, but English August, Mr. and Mrs. Iyer, you know that Rahul can do this.
Favorite international movie, actor and director? Just one word answers.
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Okay. And a movie? And a director?
Most things that Terrence Malick makes. Director, Terrence Malick.
Favorite Indian movie, actor and director?
Coco, Konkona. As an actor, Satyajit Ray. The Oppu trilogy. I mean, one of the greatest. Oh my God. But whether it's Jalsha Ghor, whether it's Aurum Nadin Ratri, what do you say? What do you say about an incredible oeuvre?
One word answers, that's it. Places in your bucket list?
Machu Picchu.
Favorite restaurant in the world?
11 Madison Park.
A director you would love to work with?
Meera Nair.
A Rahul Bose biopic would be called?
Short and sweet. Short and sweet.
Thank you, Rahul Bose, for talking to me in Teacher's Glasses presents Bollywood Talkies with Outlook. Stay safe, enjoy the rest of the lockdown, and see you on the other side of the break.
Thank you, Mitrajit. To bridge the gap from the little child whose favorite person in the family is Bulbul, who he considers to be, he's always loved her. She's not moving. And even a little child knows when something very bad happens. When a little child drops a glass of milk, the first thing the child will do is look up at the adult because she or he knows that they have made a mistake. So he realizes he's made a mistake and that something very bad has happened to her. And he runs down the corridor, gets into his bed, and I didn't do it. I did nothing. I wasn't even there. Children will do. This bridge, Mitrajit, is without any words. There's not a single word. And if you look at it in screen time, it's 1 minute.